The catering invoice sat on my desk like a loaded gun. $47,000 for tonight's investor dinner. I'd paid it this morning from an account Derek didn't know existed, just like I'd paid for everything else in our carefully constructed life. The irony would have been funny if my hands weren't shaking. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Vivian, Derek's voice echoed up the spiral staircase. Where the hell did you put my cufflinks? The Swarovski ones? I closed my laptop slowly, watching the screen go dark on the spreadsheet I'd been studying. Peninsula Ventures' complete financial infrastructure, laid out in numbers that would make most people's heads spin. Every investment, every liability, every thread I could pull to unravel my husband's precious empire. Coming, I called back, my voice steady despite the storm building in my chest. 3 years. That's how long I'd been playing the role of Derek Hartman's wife, the former catalog model who'd gotten lucky, married up, and now spent her days shopping and having lunch with other wealthy wives. It was a role I'd perfected, down to the slightly vacant smile and the designer wardrobe that screamed trophy wife. What Derek didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Vivian Chen hadn't been a struggling model when we met. I'd been, still was, the silent partner behind Meridian Capital, a private equity firm that had quietly acquired 15% of Peninsula Ventures over the past 18 months. Not enough to raise alarms, but enough to have a voice when it mattered. I found Derek in our bedroom, standing in front of the full-length mirror in his custom Tom Ford tuxedo. At 43, he still had the sharp jawline and athletic build that had first caught my attention at that charity auction. Back then, I'd thought his confidence was attractive. Now I recognized it for what it truly was. Entitlement wrapped in expensive fabric. They're in the velvet box, second drawer, I said, moving to the dresser. The Swarovski ones, right? The ones I gave you for your birthday? He didn't thank me, just snatched the cufflinks and went back to his reflection. Is the caterer set up? And please tell me you remembered to tell them about Greenberg's shellfish allergy. Last thing I need is my lead investor going into anaphylactic shock. Everything's perfect, I assured him, adjusting the simple black dress I'd chosen for tonight. Armani, elegant but understated, exactly what a wife should wear when she's meant to fade into the background. The caterer has detailed notes on every guest's dietary restrictions. Derek finally looked at me, his eyes scanning my appearance with the critical assessment he usually reserved for quarterly reports. You're wearing that? Is something wrong with it? It's just... He waved his hand vaguely. Boring. This is the biggest night of my career, Viv. Greenberg and his partners are flying in from Singapore. They're about to drop $50 million into Peninsula's new tech fund. I need you to look like you belong in this world. Not like you're attending a funeral. The words stung. Exactly as he'd intended. I let my face fall just slightly, gave him the reaction he expected. I thought elegant was appropriate for a business dinner. Elegant? He laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. Honey, you're my wife, not my accountant. Go put on that red dress, the Versace. Show some personality for once. I wanted to tell him that the Versace was too much, that I'd look like I was trying too hard. I wanted to tell him a lot of things. Instead, I nodded and moved toward the closet. And Vivian? His voice stopped me at the door. Tonight, please try not to bore our guests with your shopping stories or whatever it is you talk about with your friends. If someone asks what you do, just smile and change the subject. Let's not remind everyone that you're not exactly contributing to society in any meaningful way. My fingers tightened on the doorframe, nails pressing into the polished wood. Of course. Good girl. He turned back to his cufflinks, already dismissing me. Oh, and I've invited a few extra people. My new business partner, Nathan Cross, and his associate. Nathan's the one who put this deal together. Absolute genius. You'll like him. Just, don't embarrass me. Nathan Cross. The name sent electricity through my veins. I kept my face neutral, my voice light. Looking forward to meeting him. In the closet, I pulled out the red Versace, my mind racing. Nathan Cross was here, in my home, tonight. The man whose financial firm I'd been quietly studying for months, whose aggressive investment strategy had made him a legend in certain circles, and a predator in others. The same man who'd been positioning himself to take over Peninsula Ventures from the inside, using Derek as his unwitting puppet. And Derek had no idea. I changed into the red dress, reapplied my lipstick to a deeper shade, and studied myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was playing a role, but tonight, that role was about to shift. Tonight, Nathan Cross would meet Vivian Hartman, the decorative wife. What he wouldn't know, what none of them would know until it was too late, was that he was walking into a trap 3 years in the making. Downstairs, the catering staff moved with practiced efficiency through our open-concept living space. The penthouse had been my design, purchased through one of my shell companies, and gifted to Derek as a wedding present from my wealthy uncle. 1,700 square feet of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline, marble countertops, contemporary art that I'd selected from up-and-coming artists who'd since become major names. Every detail calculated, every element part of the foundation I'd built. Mrs. Hartman? The head of catering, a woman named Sophia who I'd personally vetted, approached with a tablet. Final confirmation on the seating arrangement? I glanced at the digital mock-up she showed me. 18 guests, positioned exactly where I needed them. Derek at the head of the table, naturally. Nathan Cross to his right, position of honor for the man of the hour. And me, tucked at the opposite end, easy to overlook, easy to forget. Perfect, I told Sophia. And the recording equipment? She lowered her voice, though we were alone in the kitchen. Embedded in the centerpieces, as requested. Audio only, high quality. Feeds directly to your secure server. Excellent. I'd hired Sophia's company specifically because they specialized in corporate espionage disguised as high-end catering. What Derek paid them for food, I paid them double for information. Remember, you're just the caterer. No one needs to know about our other arrangement. Never do, Mrs. Hartman. Sophia's smile was professional, but her eyes held a glint of respect. In another life, we might have been friends. Though I have to say, I'm curious what tonight's all about. The equipment you requested, the specific positioning, this is more elaborate than usual. Let's just say I'm tired of being underestimated. The doorbell chimed, and my stomach tightened. Game time. Derek materialized from his office, straightening his bow tie. That'll be the Greenbergs. Vivian, smile and look pretty. And for God's sake, try not to talk about your yoga class. I smiled. That perfect, vapid smile I'd mastered. I'll do my best, darling. The next 40 minutes passed in a blur of handshakes and air kisses. Richard Greenberg arrived with his wife, Margaret, both in their 60s and carrying the kind of old money that didn't need to announce itself. Then came the junior partners from Peninsula Ventures, young men in their 30s who looked at me with barely concealed assessment. calculating my value in the social equation. A few board members, a lawyer, a tech entrepreneur Derek was courting for the fund, and then Nathan Cross. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He arrived last, which I suspected was intentional. Nathan Cross didn't follow, he led. At 38, he was younger than Derek, but carried himself with the kind of authority that made age irrelevant. Dark hair styled perfectly, gray eyes that missed nothing, a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. Nathan! Derek's enthusiasm was almost embarrassing as he rushed to greet his guest. You made it! Come in, come in! Everyone, this is Nathan Cross, the mastermind behind our new tech fund. Nathan's smile was warm, practiced, perfect. He worked the room like a politician, shaking hands, making eye contact, saying exactly the right thing to each person. And when he reached me, standing near the terrace, doors with a glass of sparkling water, his expression shifted to something that made my skin crawl. Polite interest tinged with dismissal. And you must be Derek's wife, he said, his handshake firm but brief, as if touching me longer than necessary would be a waste of his time. Vivian, is it? That's right. I gave him my best vacant smile. It's wonderful to meet you. Derek's been so excited about your partnership. Has he? Nathan's attention was already sliding away, scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. That's nice. This is quite a place you have here. Thank you. My uncle helped us with it. Generous uncle. He said it like he was commenting on the weather, already turning away. Derek mentioned you used to model? Catalog work mostly, nothing exciting. I'm sure. He'd already dismissed me entirely, moving toward Greenberg without another word. I watched him go, my smile never wavering. Perfect. Let him think I was exactly what I appeared to be. Another pretty face, another wealthy wife, another piece of furniture in Derek's carefully curated life. Sophia caught my eye from across the room and gave the slightest nod. The equipment was live. Every word spoken tonight would be captured, stored, and ready for deployment when the moment was right. Dinner is served, Sophia announced, her voice carrying just the right note of professional warmth. We moved to the dining room, and I took my assigned seat at the far end of the table. From here, I had a perfect view of everything. Derek holding court, Nathan Cross charming Greenberg, the junior partners hanging on every word. The wine flowed freely, loosening tongues, lowering guards. So, Derek, Greenberg said, cutting into his perfectly prepared filet mignon. Walk me through the numbers one more time. 50 million is a significant commitment, even for us. Derek launched into his pitch, and I had to give him credit. He was good at this part. The vision, the market analysis, the projected returns. He'd always been a talented performer. What he lacked was substance, the ability to see 3 moves ahead, to understand that every action had consequences. The beauty of this fund, Nathan interjected smoothly, is that we're not just investing in technology. We're investing in disruption. These companies we've identified, they're not improving existing systems. They're destroying them and building something new from the rubble. Creative destruction, Margaret Greenberg murmured. Schumpeter would approve. I kept my expression pleasantly blank, as if the reference meant nothing to me. In reality, I'd written my master's thesis on Schumpeter's economic theories, back when I was still Vivian Chen, the scholarship student who'd clawed her way through business school while working 3 jobs. Exactly. Nathan said, clearly pleased. And with Derek's infrastructure and our vision, we're positioned to dominate this space. The returns could be astronomical. Could be, Greenberg repeated, his tone careful. But there's risk. There's always risk. Minimal risk, Derek assured him. We've done our due diligence. Every company in the portfolio has been thoroughly vetted. I took a sip of water, watching Nathan cross over the rim of my glass. He was good, I'd give him that. The way he worked the table, reinforcing Derek's points while subtly positioning himself as the real intelligence behind the operation. The junior partners practically worshipped him. Even Greenberg, for all his caution, was leaning in, engaged. What none of them realized was that I'd seen Nathan's playbook before. 3 times, to be exact. 3 different partnerships where he'd positioned himself as the genius investor, convinced wealthy backers to commit enormous sums, and then systematically hollowed out the companies from the inside, extracting fees and personal profits while leaving his partners holding worthless shells. Derek was partner number 4, and I was going to make sure he was the last. Vivian. Derek's voice cut through my thoughts, loud enough to draw everyone's attention. You're being awfully quiet down there. Everything okay? The subtext was clear. Don't embarrass me by staying silent like a lump. I smiled, playing my part. Just enjoying the conversation. You all are so much smarter than me about these things. Nathan laughed, the sound patronizing. That's refreshing. Most wives I meet feel compelled to offer their opinions on everything. Not Vivian, Derek said, and I could hear the pride in his voice. Pride in having a wife who knew her place. She's smart enough to know what she doesn't know. Isn't that right, honey? That's right, I agreed softly. Across from me, one of the junior partners, Bradley something, I'd forgotten his last name, was smirking into his wine glass. Must be nice, he said, not quite under his breath. Some of us have to work for a living. Bradley, Derek warned, but he was laughing. The whole table was laughing, a chorus of successful men amused by the woman who'd married well and contributed nothing. No, he's right, I said, maintaining my smile even as rage burned in my chest. I'm very fortunate. Derek works so hard, and I get to enjoy the benefits. See? Derek gestured at me like I was Exhibit A. She gets it. Some people are builders, some people are supporters. Here's to the supporters. Nathan raised his glass in mock toast. Where would we be without them? More laughter, more knowing looks. I raised my own glass, playing along, and caught Sophia's eye in the doorway. She'd heard every word. It was all being recorded, adding to the mountain of evidence I'd been compiling. The dinner continued, and as the wine flowed, the conversation grew more candid. This was what I'd been waiting for, the moment when success and alcohol combined to make men forget caution. The beauty of this structure, Nathan was explaining to Greenberg, leaning back in his chair with the confidence of someone who'd never been challenged, is that we maintain control while the actual risk sits with the fund investors. If something goes wrong, and statistically something always goes wrong, we're insulated. Sophisticated risk management, Greenberg noted, but his eyes had sharpened. The most sophisticated, Nathan agreed. Derek and I have structured this so that Peninsula Ventures is positioned as the management company. We collect fees regardless of performance. 2 and 20. 2% management fee on assets. 20% of profits. But here's the brilliant part. He leaned forward, warming to his subject. We've also embedded a series of consulting agreements that allow us to extract additional fees. Marketing consultation, operational oversight, strategic advisory. It's all legitimate, all spelled out in the prospectus. But it means we're generating revenue streams independent of fund performance. I kept my face neutral, but inside, my mind was cataloging every word. This was it. The confession I'd been waiting for. Nathan Cross wasn't just managing a fund. He was running a fee extraction scheme designed to enrich himself and Derek while leaving investors like Greenberg exposed to all the downside risk. That's... Greenberg paused, choosing his words carefully. Aggressive. It's standard in the industry, Derek interjected quickly. All the major funds operate this way. That was a lie, and Greenberg knew it. I could see it in the slight tightening around his eyes, the way his hand stilled on his wine glass. But he said nothing, not yet. He was too polite, too much the gentleman to cause a scene at dinner. Nathan, emboldened by wine and Derek's support, continued. Look, Richard, you didn't build your fortune by being conservative. Sometimes you have to be willing to bend the rules, find creative solutions. The regulatory environment is a jungle. You either learn to navigate it, or you get eaten. Bend the rules, Greenberg repeated softly. Optimize, Nathan corrected with a shark smile. We're optimizing the structure for maximum efficiency. I watched this exchange with growing satisfaction. Nathan Cross was doing exactly what I'd predicted he would do, getting too comfortable, too confident, saying the quiet parts out loud. And it was all being recorded in crystal clear audio. Every word, every inflection, every damning admission. Speaking of optimization, one of the junior partners said, his words slightly slurred, Did you finalize the offshore component? Nathan shot him a look that could have frozen fire. That's still in development. Nothing to discuss tonight. But the damage was done. Greenberg's wife had stiffened, and even the tech entrepreneur, who'd been mostly silent throughout dinner, looked uncomfortable. Offshore? Greenberg's voice was deceptively mild. I don't recall seeing anything about offshore structures in the prospectus. Because it's preliminary, Derek jumped in, trying to smooth things over. Just some basic tax optimization. Completely legal. Completely standard. Of course, Greenberg said, but his tone suggested he didn't believe a word of it. The tension around the table was palpable now, the earlier bonhomie evaporating like morning mist. Nathan tried to redirect the conversation, asking Margaret about her foundation work, but the spell was broken. Greenberg was done being charmed. Vivian, Margaret said suddenly, turning to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Derek mentioned you used to model. Do you miss it? The question was a kindness, an attempt to shift away from the uncomfortable business talk. I could have played along, kept my role as the vapid wife. But something in Margaret's eyes, a flash of recognition, of understanding, made me choose a different path. Sometimes, I said carefully, but I found other interests. Oh? Margaret's interest seemed genuine. Like what? I read a lot. Economics, mostly. Business strategy. Derek laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet room. Vivian's trying to understand what I do. It's sweet, really, but I keep telling her. Reading books isn't the same as real-world experience. Books can be surprisingly educational, Margaret said, her tone pointed. I find that the most dangerous people are the ones who underestimate the power of knowledge. Knowledge is one thing, Nathan said, his voice dripping with condescension. Application is another. No offense to Vivian, but there's a difference between reading about business and actually building something. I met his eyes across the table, let my smile turn just slightly sharper. Of course. Though I've always found it interesting how many successful businesses are built on other people's money and other people's ideas, the real skill is in the presentation, isn't it? Making people believe you're giving them something valuable when really, you're just taking their money and hoping they don't notice until it's too late. The silence that followed was absolute. Nathan's expression had frozen, his eyes suddenly sharp and assessing. Derek looked confused, uncertain whether I'd just complimented or insulted his business partner. But Greenberg was watching me with new interest, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Nathan started, then stopped, clearly recalculating his assessment of me. Vivian's had too much wine, Derek said quickly, his hand waving dismissively. Honey, maybe you should... Actually, I've been drinking water all night, I interrupted, my voice still sweet but with an edge that hadn't been there before. I like to keep a clear head. You never know what you might miss if you're not paying attention. Margaret actually laughed, a short, delighted sound. I like you, Vivian. You're more interesting than you pretend to be. I've learned that it's often useful to be underestimated, I said, meeting her eyes. People tell you the most fascinating things when they think you're not really listening. The implications hung in the air like smoke. Nathan's jaw had tightened, and he was looking at me now with the kind of focused attention he'd denied me earlier. Derek just looked confused and increasingly angry, probably calculating how much damage control he'd need to do after I'd embarrassed him. But I wasn't done. You know what I find most interesting about business? I continued, my tone conversational, as if I were discussing the weather. It's the psychology of it. The way people convince themselves that what they're doing is smart, innovative, groundbreaking, when really it's just the same old scam in a new package. Creative destruction, as Mrs. Greenberg said. Though sometimes I wonder, are we creating anything, or just destroying? Vivian. Derek's voice had turned dangerous. That's enough. Is it? I turned to him, my expression innocent. I thought you wanted me to participate in the conversation. Or did you just want me to sit here and look pretty while you and Nathan explain how you're going to extract fees from Mr. Greenberg's $50 million, regardless of whether the fund actually performs? The explosion was immediate. What the hell are you talking about? Derek's face had gone red, his hands slamming down on the table hard enough to make the glasses jump. I'm talking about the 2-in-20 fee structure, plus the embedded consulting agreements that Nathan was so helpfully explaining earlier. The ones designed to ensure you and Nathan get paid even if every single company in the portfolio goes bankrupt. I kept my voice level, factual, as if I were reading from a prospectus. It's actually quite clever if your goal is to extract maximum value while bearing minimum risk. Less clever if you're the investor putting up the actual capital. Greenberg had set down his fork, his full attention now on me. Go on. Vivian has no idea what she's talking about, Nathan said quickly. But there was something new in his voice. Fear. She's confused, taking things out of context. Am I? I tilted my head, studying him. Or have I been paying very close attention while everyone assumed I was too stupid to understand what was happening in my own home? How dare you? Derek started to rise from his chair, but Greenberg held up a hand. Let her talk, he said quietly. So I did. I told them about the fee structure, the offshore components that were still in development, the way the consulting agreements were designed to siphon money from the fund. I explained how the investment thesis itself was flawed, based on inflated projections and cherry-picked data. I walked them through the risk profile, the lack of proper due diligence, the ways in which Nathan had structured the fund to benefit himself and Derek while exposing investors to catastrophic downside. And I did it all from memory, without notes, with the kind of fluency that came from months of careful analysis and preparation. When I finished, the table was silent. Derek looked like he might actually explode. Nathan's earlier charm had vanished entirely, replaced by cold fury. The junior partners were staring at their plates, suddenly very interested in their uneaten dessert. But Greenberg was leaning back in his chair, fingers steepled, studying me with open fascination. "How," he said finally, "does a former catalog model know this much about private equity fee structures?" I smiled, and this time there was nothing vapid or decorative about it. Because I'm not actually a former catalog model. That was just a convenient story. Then what are you? I pulled out my phone, tapped a few buttons, and pulled up a document that I slid across the table to Greenberg. I'm the managing partner of Meridian Capital. We currently own 15% of Peninsula Ventures, enough to have voting rights on major decisions, including decisions about whether to approve this fund. The sound Derek made was somewhere between a gasp and a choke. Nathan's brain was visibly working, trying to process this information. That's impossible. Meridian is owned by a consortium of international investors, shell companies, all controlled by me, I confirmed. It's actually not that hard to hide ownership when you know what you're doing. And I know what I'm doing. This is insane! Derek finally found his voice, though it was shaking with rage. You've been lying to me for 3 years? About everything? Not everything, I corrected mildly. I really do take yoga classes. And I actually did model for about 6 months when I was 22 to help pay for business school. The rest? I shrugged. The rest was necessary camouflage. Camouflage for what? Greenberg asked, and I could see the calculation in his eyes. He was already several moves ahead, understanding that this revelation had implications far beyond tonight's dinner. For this, I gestured at the table, at the shocked faces, at the ruins of Derek's carefully planned evening. I needed to understand exactly what was happening inside Peninsula Ventures. I needed to see how Derek operated, how Nathan operated, what kind of scheme they were running. And the best way to do that was to make everyone think I was too stupid to matter. You married me to spy on my company? Derek's voice cracked on the last word. No, I said honestly. I married you because I thought you were different. I thought you were actually building something real. But then I realized you were just another con artist in a nice suit, willing to sell out your investors for a quick payday. So I adapted. Nathan had recovered some of his composure, his mind clearly racing for a way out. This is all very dramatic, but it doesn't change anything. You own 15%. Not enough to block the fund. Derek and I have the board votes we need. Do you? I pulled up another document on my phone. Because I've spent the last 3 months having very quiet conversations with the other board members, showing them some interesting patterns in Peninsula's expense reports, questionable consulting fees, conflicts of interest. Nothing illegal, necessarily, but enough to make people uncomfortable. I paused, letting that sink in. And then there's this dinner party. All of it recorded. Every word, every admission, every careless statement about bending rules and offshore structures and fee extraction. I'm sure Mr. Greenberg would be very interested in hearing the full audio. As would the SEC, if it came to that. The color had drained from Nathan's face. You're bluffing. Am I? I turned to Sophia, who'd been standing quietly in the doorway. Sophia, could you play back the last 5 minutes of Nathan's conversation with Mr. Greenberg? The part where he explained the fee structure? Sophia pulled out a small device, pressed a button, and Nathan's voice filled the room. The beauty of this structure is that we maintain control, while the actual risk sits with the fund investors. Turn it off, Nathan said through clenched teeth. Sophia looked at me. I nodded, and she stopped the playback. I have about 4 hours of audio from tonight, I said pleasantly. Plus documentation of every shady deal you've done together over the past 2 years. Email chains that Derek thought were on secure servers. Pro tip, your IT guy takes bribes. Financial records that show exactly how you've been inflating numbers and hiding losses. Testimony from 3 of Nathan's previous partners who are very willing to discuss his pattern of behavior. I stood up, smoothing my red dress, the one Derek had insisted I wear to look pretty for his investors. So, here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice carrying the authority I'd been hiding for 3 years. Mr. Greenberg is going to walk away from this deal tonight, and he's going to tell every other potential investor exactly why. Peninsula Ventures' reputation is about to become toxic, not because I'm going to release this information publicly, but because I don't have to. Word travels fast in our circles. You can't do this, Derek whispered, but there was no conviction in his voice. I already have, I told him. As of 3 hours ago, Meridian Capital has filed formal complaints with the board regarding financial irregularities at Peninsula Ventures. There will be an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. I suspect Nathan's partnership will be dissolved by noon. And Derek, you'll be lucky if you're still employed by the end of the week. This is blackmail, Nathan spat. No, Greenberg spoke up, his voice calm and measured. This is consequences. Something you've apparently spent your career avoiding, Mr. Cross. He stood, helping his wife from her chair. Vivian, I'd like to schedule a meeting with you. Tomorrow, if possible. I believe Meridian Capital might be interested in some of our other investment opportunities. I'd be delighted, I said. He turned to Derek, and his expression was pure contempt. You brought this on yourself. You had a brilliant wife right under your nose, and you treated her like furniture. That's not just bad marriage. It's bad business. The Greenbergs left. The other guests followed quickly, nobody wanting to be associated with what had just happened. Within 10 minutes, the penthouse was empty except for Derek, Nathan, Sophia's catering team, and me. Derek sank into his chair, head in his hands. Nathan was on his phone, probably calling his lawyer. Why? Derek looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked genuinely lost. Why go through all of this? The marriage, the pretending, the everything. If you wanted to destroy me, you could have just exposed me from the start. I considered the question, measuring my answer. Because I needed to be sure. I needed to know if you were really as bad as I suspected, or if there was something worth saving. I gave you 3 years to prove yourself. Instead, you proved exactly what kind of person you are. Someone who values power over partnership, who'd rather have a decorative wife than an equal partner, who's willing to commit fraud as long as there's money in it. And Nathan? Derek gestured weakly at his business partner, who was now pacing near the windows, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. Nathan was just the catalyst. He's been running this scam for years. When I saw him moving in on Peninsula, I knew I had to act. You were going to lose everything anyway. I just made sure I'd be there to pick up the pieces. Derek laughed bitterly. So you're taking the company? I'm saving the company, I corrected. There's a difference. Peninsula Ventures was actually good once, before you decided to sell out. With Nathan gone and proper oversight, it can be good again. And me? I looked at my husband, soon to be ex-husband, and felt nothing but tired relief. You'll survive. You always land on your feet, Derek. It's your gift. But you'll do it somewhere else, with someone else's money. Nathan ended his phone call and turned to face us, his earlier polish completely gone. My lawyers will tear you apart in court. They're welcome to try, I said, but I'd think carefully before going that route. Right now, you can walk away from this with just a reputation hit. Start a legal fight, and all that evidence I mentioned becomes public record. Your previous victims will come forward. The SEC will get involved. You'll be lucky to stay out of prison. The math was simple, and Nathan was smart enough to see it. After a long moment, he grabbed his coat and headed for the door. This isn't over. Yes, I said quietly. It is. When he was gone, I turned to Derek. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. You can keep your personal accounts. I've never touched your money, and I don't need it. But this penthouse, the art, everything that came through my shell companies, that stays with me. Where am I supposed to go? I honestly don't care, Derek. You have friends, family, resources. Figure it out. He stood, and for a moment, I thought he might try to argue, to fight, to do something. Instead, he just looked at me with something that might have been respect, mixed with bewilderment. I never knew you at all, did I? No, I agreed. You never wanted to. He left without another word, and I heard the elevator doors close behind him with a soft electronic chime. Sophia emerged from the kitchen, her catering team efficiently clearing dishes. That went well. Did it? I moved to the windows, looking out at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere out there, Greenberg was probably already making calls, spreading the word about what had happened tonight. Nathan Cross would find his phone eerily quiet over the next few days as investors suddenly became unavailable. Derek would wake up tomorrow to find his professional life in ruins, and I would start rebuilding Peninsula Ventures into what it should have been all along. Mrs. Hartman, Sophia's voice was careful. Are you okay? Was I? I'd spent 3 years of my life on this plan, 3 years playing a role that chafed with every breath. I'd watched the man I'd married reveal himself to be small and venal and cruel. I'd given up authenticity for strategy, truth for tactics, but I'd also protected Greenberg's money. I'd prevented Nathan Cross from victimizing another set of investors. I'd positioned myself to take control of a company that, with the right leadership, could actually make a difference in the technology sector. I'm fine, I told Sophia, and realized it was true. I'm better than fine. I'm exactly where I need to be. She nodded, understanding perhaps more than I'd said. The audio files have been uploaded to your secure server. The backup copies are in 3 separate locations, as requested, and I've prepared the documentation package for tomorrow's board meeting. Thank you. You've been invaluable through all of this. It's been my pleasure, Mrs. Hartman. It's not often I get to watch someone pull off something this elegant. She paused. Though I have to ask, was any of it real? The marriage, I mean. Or was it all just cover? I finished for her. No, it was real at first. I genuinely loved him, or thought I did. I loved who I thought he was. But people show you who they really are, if you pay attention. Derek showed me over and over again. I just needed to be sure before I acted. Sophia accepted that with a nod. Well, for what it's worth, he's an idiot. Anyone who doesn't see your value doesn't deserve to benefit from it. After the catering team finished and left, I poured myself a real glass of wine, not the sparkling water I'd been drinking all night, and returned to the windows. My phone was already buzzing with messages. Greenberg, confirming tomorrow's meeting. 3 board members, requesting private conversations. A lawyer I'd retained weeks ago, confirming she'd received the divorce papers and would file first thing in the morning. And 1 message from an unknown number. Impressive. I underestimated you. That won't happen again. NC. Nathan Cross, already regrouping, already planning his comeback. He was nothing if not resilient. I deleted the message without responding. Let him wonder. Let him worry. He'd spent his career underestimating people, taking advantage of their trust. Tonight, he'd learned what happened when someone turned his own tactics against him. The city lights stretched out before me, endless and bright. Tomorrow would bring challenges, the board meeting, the divorce proceedings, the delicate work of rebuilding Peninsula's reputation. There would be lawsuits, probably, despite my warnings. Attempts to salvage or spin what had happened tonight. But for now, in this moment, I allowed myself to simply breathe. 3 years of careful planning, of swallowing my pride, of playing small so I could strike big. 3 years of being underestimated, patronized, dismissed. 3 years of watching my husband treat me like a pretty accessory while he destroyed something that could have been meaningful. It was over. I raised my wine glass to my reflection in the window, to the woman who'd been hiding behind Vivian Hartman's cultivated emptiness. Welcome back, I whispered to myself. And somewhere in the city below, in a boardroom that would soon be mine, tomorrow was already waiting. The Peninsula Ventures boardroom had never felt more like a battlefield. 7 faces stared back at me from across the mahogany table, their expressions ranging from shock to curiosity to barely concealed hostility. I'd walked in at exactly 9 a.m., dressed in a navy Armani suit that screamed competence. No more red Versace. No more playing the decorative wife. "Good morning, gentlemen," I said, settling into the chair that had been reserved for representatives of Meridian Capital. They'd expected lawyers. They got me instead. "I believe we have some things to discuss." Thomas Blackwell, the board chairman and Derek's mentor, leaned back in his chair with the expression of a man trying to solve a puzzle he hadn't known existed. "Mrs. Hartman. Or should I say Ms. Chen? I have to admit, this is the most creative board presentation I've encountered in 40 years. Vivian is fine," I told him, opening my laptop. "And I apologize for the theatrics, but sometimes the only way to expose a problem is to let it think it's winning." Expose a problem? One of the junior board members, Harrison, a tech investor in his 30s, scoffed. "You mean destroy Derek's career and cost us the biggest investment opportunity we've had in years?" "I mean save you from committing $50 million to a fraud scheme," I corrected, pulling up the first slide of my presentation. "If you'll give me 20 minutes, I can show you exactly what Nathan Cross and my soon-to-be ex-husband were planning to do with our Greenberg's money." Blackwell held up a hand, silencing Harrison's protest. 20 minutes. But this better be good, because right now, you look like a scorned wife with an elaborate revenge fantasy." "Oh, it's elaborate," I agreed. "But it's not fantasy." I walked them through everything. The fee structure's designed to extract maximum profit regardless of fund performance. The offshore accounts being set up in the Cayman Islands. The pattern of Nathan's previous partnerships. Each one ending with investors losing millions while Nathan walked away wealthy. the falsified due diligence reports on the tech companies they'd planned to invest in. Startups that looked promising on paper, but were essentially vaporware with good marketing. With each slide, each piece of evidence, I watched their expressions change. Skepticism gave way to concern, then to anger. "This is the audio from last night's dinner," I said, playing a carefully edited segment. Nathan's voice filled the room. "We maintain control while the actual risk sits with the fund investors. We've embedded a series of consulting agreements that allow us to extract additional fees. Sometimes you have to be willing to bend the rules." When it finished, the silence was absolute. "Jesus Christ," someone muttered. Blackwell's face had gone pale. "How long have you known about this?" "I've been documenting Nathan's activities for 18 months, but I only confirmed Derek's involvement 6 months ago. I'd hoped..." I paused, allowing myself a moment of genuine emotion. "I'd hoped I was wrong about him. That's why I waited. I needed to be absolutely certain before I acted." "Why not just come to us immediately?" Harrison asked, and his hostility had evaporated, replaced by something closer to awe. "Why the whole elaborate charade?" "Because Nathan Cross is very good at what he does. He's charismatic, convincing, and he knows how to make everything look legitimate on paper. If I'd come to you with accusations, he would have discredited me. The scorned wife making wild claims, exactly as you suggested. But if I let him hang himself with his own words, in front of witnesses, recorded for posterity..." I shrugged. "That's a different story." "You manipulated them," another board member said, Carolyn Wu, the only other woman on the board. But she was smiling slightly. "You created the perfect environment for them to reveal themselves." "I gave them enough rope," I confirmed. "They chose to use it." Blackwell stood, walking to the windows that overlooked Lake Michigan. "Derek's going to fight this. He'll claim the recordings are inadmissible, that you entrapped him somehow. He can try, but I have 3 witnesses beyond the recordings, the Greenbergs and Margaret's personal assistant, who was also present. I have documentary evidence of financial irregularities going back 2 years. And I have Nathan's 3 previous partners, all willing to testify about his pattern of behavior. Derek can fight all he wants, but he'll lose." "And what do you want, Ms. Chen?" Blackwell turned to face me. "Beyond revenge, beyond destroying your husband's career, what's your endgame here?" This was the moment I'd been building toward, the real reason I'd orchestrated everything so carefully. "I want to save Peninsula Ventures," I said simply. "This company was founded on good principles, identifying promising technology and helping it reach market. But somewhere along the way, it became about extraction instead of creation, about taking fees instead of building value. I want to return it to what it was supposed to be." "Noble sentiment," Harrison said. "But how does that benefit Meridian Capital? Your 15% stake?" I smiled. "I'm prepared to make Meridian's stake contingent on performance. No extraction of fees, no consulting agreements, no offshore games. Just straight equity participation. If Peninsula succeeds, Meridian succeeds. If it fails, I lose money, along with everyone else." The room erupted in surprised murmurs. This wasn't how private equity operated. Nobody put their money at risk without hedges, without guaranteed returns. "Why would you do that?" Carolyn asked. "Because I don't need the money," I told them honestly. "Meridian is profitable enough. What I need is to prove that business doesn't have to be predatory to be successful. That you can build something real without exploiting the people who trust you." Blackwell studied me for a long moment. You're either the most idealistic person I've ever met, or the most calculating. I can't decide which. Maybe both, I suggested. Is there a reason they have to be mutually exclusive? He laughed, the sound surprised but genuine. Fair point. So, what do you propose, specifically? I pulled up my final slide, a reorganization plan I'd spent months developing. Nathan Cross is out, effective immediately. Derek is placed on administrative leave pending a full review of his activities. We bring in an independent auditor to examine the past 2 years of transactions. Any questionable fees are returned to the company. And we restructure the board to include more diverse perspectives, people who aren't just focused on quarterly returns, but on long-term sustainability. And you? Blackwell asked. Where do you fit in this new structure? I'd like a board seat. I've earned it, I think. But I'm not interested in day-to-day operations. Meridian keeps me busy enough. I just want to ensure Peninsula stays on track. Harrison was shaking his head in disbelief. You orchestrated this entire thing, the marriage, the investigation, last night's dinner party, just to get a board seat? No, I corrected. I orchestrated this to stop Nathan Cross from victimizing another set of investors. The board seat is just a nice bonus. And for the record, the marriage was real. At least, it was real to me at the beginning. Derek's the one who turned it into something else. Carolyn Wu leaned forward, her expression shrewd. What happens if we say no? If we decide to stand by Derek and try to salvage the Greenberg deal? Then I take this evidence to the SEC, I said flatly. And Peninsula Ventures spends the next 5 years buried in investigations and lawsuits. You'll lose Greenberg's money anyway, plus your reputation, plus any chance of attracting future investors. Derek and Nathan might avoid prison if they have good lawyers, but the company will be destroyed. So this is blackmail after all, Harrison said. No, Blackwell cut in. This is leverage. There's a difference. Ms. Chen has given us a choice. Work with her to fix this mess, or let it destroy us. That's not blackmail. That's business. He turned back to me. I'll need to consult with the full board, but speaking personally, I think you're right. We've lost our way. And if it took an elaborate con to expose that, well, perhaps we deserve to be conned. I prefer to think of it as aggressive due diligence, I said with a slight smile. I'm sure you do. Blackwell actually laughed. Derek always said you were just a pretty face. I'm starting to think that might be the worst judgment call he ever made. Oh, it definitely was, I agreed. The meeting lasted another hour, with each board member asking detailed questions about my evidence, my plans, my intentions. By the end, even Harrison seemed convinced, or at least resigned to the inevitable. We'll vote tomorrow, Blackwell announced. But Ms. Chen, I think you can expect that board seat. God knows we need someone who actually pays attention. I left the Peninsula offices and headed directly to my divorce lawyer's office. Patricia Thornton was everything I'd needed in an attorney. Sharp, ruthless, and completely unbothered by the unconventional nature of my situation. Your husband's lawyer called this morning, Patricia said, gesturing me into her office. 4 times. He's threatening to contest the divorce, claim fraud, demand half of your Meridian holdings. Let me guess, he thinks I owe Derek compensation for deceiving him? That's the general argument, though it's nonsense legally. You kept your business interests separate, never commingled funds, and there's no law against being smarter than your spouse. She pulled out a file. I've prepared a response that essentially says, go ahead and try. The moment Derek's lawyer realizes you have recordings of him discussing financial fraud, they'll back down. And if they don't, Patricia smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Then we bury him. I've been doing this for 20 years, Vivian. I've never seen a case with this much documentation, this much evidence of wrongdoing. Derek should be grateful you're offering him a clean exit instead of a perp walk. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at Sapphire Lounge, 7 p.m. Derek. I showed it to Patricia. Should I? It's not a legal problem if you do, though I'd recommend recording the conversation. But Vivian, she leaned forward, her expression serious. Are you sure you want to? Sometimes closure just opens old wounds. I'm sure, I said. He deserves a chance to understand why this happened. And maybe I need to say some things to his face instead of through lawyers. The Sapphire Lounge was where Derek and I had gone on our first date, 3 years and a lifetime ago. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner booth, looking smaller somehow than he had at last night's dinner. The expensive suit couldn't hide the defeated slope of his shoulders. You came, he said as I slid into the booth across from him. You asked. A waiter appeared, and Derek ordered his usual whiskey. I asked for sparkling water. Old habits. I spent the whole day trying to understand, Derek said once we were alone again. Talking to lawyers, to Thomas, to anyone who might explain how my wife became a private equity magnate without me noticing. You know what the consensus is? That you weren't paying attention? He laughed bitterly. That I'm an idiot. That I had something real and I took it for granted because I was too busy playing the big shot. You're not an idiot, Derek. You're just limited. You see what you want to see. You wanted a trophy wife, so that's what you saw. The fact that I was more than that I could be a partner instead of a decoration, you never even considered it. Because you lied to me. His voice rose, then fell as he remembered where we were. For 3 years, you lied about everything. Who you were, what you did, what you were capable of. How is that fair? Fair? I leaned back, studying the man I'd married. Derek, do you remember the first time you introduced me to your colleagues? At that conference in New York? He frowned. What does that... You introduced me as your girlfriend, the model. And when I tried to contribute to the conversation about venture capital trends, you literally put your hand on my knee under the table to shut me up. Then you laughed and said, "She's beautiful, but she's not here for the business talk." Do you remember that? His face paled slightly. I was joking. No, you weren't. You were establishing a dynamic, making it clear that I wasn't supposed to have opinions, wasn't supposed to be smart or knowledgeable, just decorative. And when I realized that's what you wanted, that's what you'd always want, I made a choice. I could leave you, or I could use the situation to my advantage. By spying on me? By protecting other people from you. I corrected. Derek, you were going to commit fraud. Maybe you didn't think of it that way. Maybe Nathan convinced you it was all legitimate business practice. But you were going to help him steal $50 million from Richard Greenberg. Did you even stop to think about what that would mean? About the consequences? We would have made money. You would have extracted fees while Greenberg lost everything. I kept my voice low but let the anger show. That was the plan. That's what Nathan does. He finds partners like you, smart enough to be useful, but not smart enough to see the con. And he uses them to legitimize his schemes. Then, when everything falls apart, he walks away wealthy, and his partners take the blame. Derek's hands were shaking around his whiskey glass. I didn't know about Nathan's history, about the offshore accounts. You didn't want to know, I said, because knowing would have meant admitting you were doing something wrong. And you've spent your whole life avoiding that admission, haven't you? Every shortcut, every ethical compromise, every time you chose the easy money over the right thing, you justified it by telling yourself everyone does it. So this is punishment? For being imperfect? No, Derek. This is consequences. For being cruel. For being dismissive. For treating me like I was worthless because I wasn't contributing to your career. You know what hurt the most? Not the mockery at the dinner parties, not the casual dismissals. It was the complete lack of curiosity. In 3 years of marriage, you never once asked me what I thought about something meaningful. What my dreams were, what I wanted to accomplish. You just assumed I didn't have any. He looked away, and I could see tears threatening at the corners of his eyes. I did love you, at the beginning. I know, I said, and found that I meant it. I loved you too. That's why this hurts. But love isn't enough when it's built on lies. And Derek, you were lying too. You pretended to be a decent person, someone who cared about building something meaningful. But you weren't. You were just another guy looking for the quickest path to wealth, regardless of who got hurt along the way. So what happens now? He asked. Peninsula fires me, you get your board seat, and I lose everything? You don't lose everything. You keep your personal accounts, your car, your reputation outside of Peninsula. I'm not trying to destroy you, Derek. I'm just removing you from a position where you can cause more damage. Generous of you, he said bitterly. It is, actually. I could have pressed charges. I have enough evidence to make a criminal case. But I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in prevention. Nathan Cross won't work in this industry again. You'll have a much harder time, but you're smart and you're charming. You'll land somewhere. Just hopefully somewhere with better oversight. Derek drained his whiskey, set the glass down with careful precision. I'm not going to fight the divorce. My lawyer says I'd lose anyway. But even if I wouldn't, I'm tired, Vivian. I'm tired of trying to be something I'm not, of pretending I'm some genius entrepreneur when really I'm just good at selling other people's ideas. Maybe it's time to stop. Maybe it is, I agreed softly. He stood, pulling on his coat. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not for getting caught. For deserving to get caught. You were right there, the whole time, and I was too stupid to see you. Yes, I said. You were. He left, and I sat alone in the booth for a while, processing the conversation. It hadn't been satisfying in the way I'd expected. No dramatic confrontation, no final cutting remark. Just two people acknowledging that they'd failed each other in different ways. My phone buzzed again. Patricia, with news that Derek's lawyer had agreed to an uncontested divorce. The settlement would be finalized within 60 days. Over the next 2 weeks, everything fell into place with the kind of efficiency that comes from thorough preparation. The Peninsula Board voted unanimously to accept my proposal. Nathan Cross quietly resigned and left Chicago, his reputation in tatters. An independent audit uncovered another $3 million in questionable expenses, all of which were returned to the company's accounts. Derek officially resigned on a Friday afternoon, with a brief statement about pursuing other opportunities. The industry gossip was fierce but ultimately favorable to Peninsula. We dodged a bullet, and everyone knew it. Richard Greenberg called me personally. I wanted to thank you, he said. Not just for saving my money, but for the reminder that due diligence means actually doing the diligence. I almost invested in that fund based on charisma and smooth talk. That's not like me. Nathan's very good at what he does, I said. So are you, apparently. Margaret wants to have lunch with you next week. She thinks you'd be a good fit for some of her foundation's initiatives. I'd like that. And I would. For all the deception, all the manipulation, I'd found something valuable in the wreckage. People like the Greenbergs, like Carolyn Wu, like Thomas Blackwell, who were genuinely trying to do business the right way. They'd been outnumbered, outmaneuvered by people like Nathan and Derek, but they were still there, still fighting. My first official board meeting at Peninsula Ventures was scheduled for a Monday morning. I arrived early, claiming the seat that had been added to the table specifically for me. The others filtered in, and I saw respect in their eyes now instead of dismissal. Before we begin, Blackwell said, I want to officially welcome Ms. Chen to the board. I think we can all agree she's earned her place here, even if her methods were unconventional. Polite laughter around the table. I smiled and nodded. I also want to announce that we've found a replacement for Derek as VP of Operations. She comes highly recommended from our West Coast office, with 15 years of experience in tech investment and a reputation for ethical practice. Ms. Jennifer Park, welcome. A woman in her 40s entered the room, and I recognized the steel in her eyes, the same determination I saw in my own mirror every morning. We shook hands, and I knew Peninsula had made the right choice. The meeting proceeded smoothly. We discussed restructuring the investment portfolio, implementing new oversight procedures, establishing an ethics committee. All the things that should have been in place years ago before Nathan Cross ever walked through the door. Afterward, Carolyn Wu caught up with me in the hallway. I wanted to ask you something, she said. Off the record. Of course. Was any of it real? The marriage? The love? Or was it always just the long con? I considered the question carefully. It was real until it wasn't. I really did fall in love with Derek, or with who I thought he was. And when I realized he wasn't that person, I had a choice. Walk away with nothing to show for it, or stay and make sure he couldn't hurt anyone else the way he was about to hurt Greenberg. I chose to stay. That must have been difficult. 3 years is a long time to maintain that kind of deception. It was, I admitted. Some mornings I'd wake up and forget I was supposed to be the vapid wife. I'd start to say something smart, make an observation about the market, and have to catch myself. The worst part was watching Derek's respect for me deteriorate month by month, knowing I was deliberately cultivating that disrespect. Why not just tell him the truth? Demand to be treated as an equal? Because he wouldn't have, I said simply. Derek loved having a trophy wife. He loved introducing me as the model he'd married. Loved the way other men envied him. If I'd revealed myself, demanded respect, he would have resented it. He might have even left. And then I wouldn't have been in position to stop Nathan's scheme. Carolyn nodded slowly. You sacrificed your own authenticity to prevent a greater harm. That's either very noble or very calculated. Why not both? I echoed my earlier words to Blackwell, and Carolyn smiled. You're going to do well here, Vivian. Just promise me something. No more elaborate deceptions. At least, not with your fellow board members. I promise, I said. I'm done pretending to be less than I am. That game gets exhausting. 3 months later, I sat in my corner office at Meridian Capital, reviewing Peninsula's quarterly reports. The numbers were good. Not spectacular, but solid. Steady growth, ethical practices, no hidden fees or offshore accounts. Just good business, done the right way. My phone rang. Thomas Blackwell. I wanted to update you on Derek, he said without preamble. He's landed at a small firm in Denver. Middle management, nothing glamorous, but honest work. Apparently, he's actually good at it when he's not trying to be the next big thing. That's actually nice to hear, I said, surprised by my own sincerity. And Nathan Cross? Last I heard, he's in Singapore trying to rebuild. But word has spread. Nobody's touching him with a 10-foot pole. He's effectively blacklisted. Good. Vivian? Blackwell's tone shifted, became more serious. I need to ask you something. Are there any other surprises we should know about? Any other secrets you're keeping? I thought about my other investments, my other identities, the complex web of companies and holdings I controlled. But none of them posed a threat to Peninsula, and none of them were anyone's business but mine. Nothing that affects Peninsula, I said. Everything else is separate, clean, and completely transparent to the relevant parties. I believe you, he said, though I'm not sure I would have 3 months ago. 3 months ago, I was still married to Derek and pretending to be someone I wasn't. A lot has changed. It has indeed. Listen, the board is meeting next month to discuss long-term strategy. We'd like your input on some potential investments. Your actual input this time, not the decorative wife version. I smiled. I'll prepare something. And Thomas? Thank you for giving me a chance even after everything. You earned it, he said simply. Multiple times over. See you next month. After we hung up, I turned to my computer and pulled up the file I'd been building. A new project. Something I'd been thinking about for years but had never had the resources or platform to attempt. A mentorship program for women in business. Not just the ones who already had MBAs and connections, but the ones coming up the hard way, working 3 jobs to pay for community college, being underestimated at every turn. Women like I'd been, before I learned to use that underestimation as a weapon. The program would provide capital, yes, but also knowledge. How to build shell companies for privacy. How to protect your assets. How to document everything so that if someone tried to steal from you, you'd have evidence. How to be smart in a world that often punished women for their intelligence. And most importantly, how to be authentically yourself while still playing the game. My assistant knocked on the door. Ms. Chen? Your 3 o'clock is here. Send them in. A young woman entered, mid-20s, nervous energy barely contained. She'd contacted Meridian 6 weeks ago with a business proposal that was rough around the edges but showed real promise. A logistics app that could revolutionize small business shipping. Ms. Chen, she said, shaking my hand with perhaps too much force. Thank you so much for agreeing to meet with me. I know you must be incredibly busy. Sit, I said gently, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. And call me Vivian. Tell me about your app. She did, stumbling over words at first, but gaining confidence as she went. I listened, asked questions, saw the potential she couldn't quite articulate yet. She reminded me of myself 10 years ago. Smart, driven, but lacking the resources and connections to break through. I think this could work, I said when she finished. But it needs refinement. The business model is too dependent on external funding. You need to find a way to generate revenue from day one, even if it's modest. Her face fell slightly. So you're not interested in investing? I didn't say that. I pulled out a contract I'd prepared after reviewing her initial proposal. Meridian Capital is prepared to offer you seed funding, $250,000 for 15% equity. But more than that, I'm offering you mentorship, weekly meetings for the first year, access to my network, guidance on everything from incorporation to exit strategy. She stared at the contract like it might disappear if she looked away. I don't understand. Why? You don't even know me. No, I agreed. But I know what it's like to be underestimated. To have good ideas that nobody takes seriously because they've decided you're just a pretty face, or too young, or not connected enough. I know what it's like to fight for every inch of credibility. And you're offering to help me skip that fight? No. The fight is necessary. It makes you sharper, more resilient. But I can give you tools for the fight. Weapons that took me years to acquire. I pushed the contract across the desk. Take it home. Read it carefully. Have a lawyer review it. If you decide you want to work with Meridian, sign it and bring it back. If not, that's okay too. She took the contract with trembling hands. Ms. Chen, Vivian, I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. And say you'll remember this feeling when you're successful. When you have resources and power and influence. Remember what it was like to need help and help someone else. After she left, I returned to my window view of Chicago. The city stretched out before me, full of ambition and deception, brilliant ideas and predatory schemes. Somewhere out there, another Nathan Cross was probably working on his next con. Another Derek was dismissing his partner's potential. Another woman was pretending to be less than she was, calculating when to strike. The business world was a battlefield, and it always would be. But now I had a position to defend, resources to deploy, and a mission that extended beyond personal revenge. Peninsula Ventures was stable and ethical. Meridian Capital was growing, funding the kind of innovative projects that actually helped people. And my mentorship program would launch next quarter, giving other women the tools I'd had to forge myself. The divorce was finalized. Derek had sent a brief email. No apology, but also no bitterness. Just an acknowledgement that we'd both moved on. Nathan Cross had disappeared into whatever hole fraudsters crawl into when their cons are exposed. And I was finally, fully, completely myself. No more pretending, no more playing small, no more letting people underestimate me because it was strategically useful. I was Vivian Chen, founder of Meridian Capital, board member of Peninsula Ventures, and someone who'd learned the hard way that the most dangerous person in any room is the one everyone dismisses. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Greenberg Foundation announces $50 million investment in women-led tech startups. I smiled. Sometimes the money that almost went to a fraud scheme finds a much better home. The sun was setting over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new battles to fight in the endless war between ethics and exploitation. But tonight, I allowed myself to simply stand at my window and appreciate how far I'd come. From the woman who'd been mocked at her own dinner party to the woman who'd dismantled the entire scheme with surgical precision. From Derek's decorative wife to someone who'd made Richard Greenberg pull $50 million from an investment with a single conversation. From invisible to inevitable. And somewhere in the city below, in 1,000 offices and boardrooms, people were learning a valuable lesson. Never underestimate the quiet ones. We're usually the ones paying the closest attention. The end. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.